Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about ego resistance, specifically ego resistance as it relates to your individuation journey, your shadow work journey, especially when you are doing sexual shadow work. So I got this idea for this episode because it comes up a lot in the work that I do with clients, but I also just received a testimonial with someone who I had worked with for 6 months. And he had a great experience. And one of the things that he wrote in his testimonial is that he almost missed our first alignment session together. So yes, I'm also starting this episode with a not so humble brag with a testimonial from one of my clients. But this is what he said. Half a year ago, a wonderful journey into the innermost parts of my soul began under the attentive guidance of Jacqueline. I'll be honest, due to resistance from my ego, I nearly overslept and missed my first session, but I never regretted a single moment since. Every session with Jacqueline felt like a full cleansing breath, renewing and invigorating. I was gradually releasing many things from my life, some of them incredibly sensitive, such as accepting my own sexuality. Each time, Jacqueline offered thoughtful insights and explained things from a unique and truly meaningful perspective. There was also plenty of laughter and lightness along the way. Although I've been in psychotherapy for many years, I must admit I've never experienced such rapid progress as I've had with Jacqueline. What's more, no one explores kink with such approachable, insightful, and richly nuanced style. I would wholeheartedly recommend her offerings to all curious and seeking souls. Thank you so much to this client who wrote this awesome testimonial, but it highlights something very important. When we're about to do work on our unconscious mind, especially when it's going to be very meaningful or it's going to change our identity, there is a natural defense in the psyche from the ego that wants to block your progress, essentially. Even though what's on the other side might be better, the ego will always focus on the data that it has and what it knows. Known misery will likely always feel better to the ego than this unknown path. And this is because there's no data on this new path. There's no data on this new identity that you're going after. So this is super common, this like I fell asleep before my session thing. This has happened a few times with current clients where it's just like before a session where we're really going to be digging into something that's very important or doing a shadow work exercise on a key piece in shifting their identity, something will happen. They'll fall asleep. Sometimes it's even like seemingly external stuff like got a flat tire, my sister's in jail, whatever. There always seems to be some kind of like outward chaos that gets ruffled up to distract us when we are about to do some really meaningful work. And in this client's example that he just gave, he actually almost missed our alignment session. The alignment sessions are just free sessions to see if we align to work together in a one-on-one coaching package. So I remember waiting for this person to get on the call and I thought, well, I got ghosted. Sometimes that happens too. Sometimes people have that like, oh, I know I need to work on this. And then when it actually comes down to sitting through the appointment with me, it's too scary to the ego. It's too scary for the nervous system. And people will just ghost. I have had that happen before to a point actually that I think I might start charging for them, but I haven't gotten there yet where it's like that much of a problem. But the busier I get, the more I really don't like it. Guys, if you sign up for an alignment call with me, come to the freaking call or at least tell me you're not going to make it. But it does happen once in a while. But this is the thing, shadow work is deep and you do get this like rapid progress. So it is very scary to the ego. And the moment we start doing shadow work, it's like your ego is going, oh no, like something's changing. I don't like this. So I always say, like, when you go into this work with me, you should be a little scared. You should be a little uncomfortable. Obviously not debilitating. If it feels debilitating or like you really can't move forward with it, that's probably your psyche telling you you're actually not ready to go there yet. So I always trust people in their process, but a lot of times I feel like people just do need like a little bit of a guided push into doing that thing that feels scary because it's ultimately going to be good for you. So let's talk about the ego resistance that I specifically see in my practice, either before saying yes to the shadow work or what happens during the shadow work process and how ego resistance works and how it shows up in these different areas. So a big one that I see is people are really excited to come work with me, they have their one-on-one alignment session, and then they go, I don't know. I don't think now's the right time. This is probably the biggest resistance I get, is that people feel like they know that this is going to be an identity level change and they're not fully ready to change yet. Because yeah, when you do shadow work, you're going to have to say goodbye to parts of your identity that your ego has really held onto for safety. And a lot of times people are afraid, like, well, what will my life look like if I'm actually more confident? What will my life look like if I'm actually free to create whatever I want and I don't have the constraints of my conditioning? And all of these things will come up. And I like to use this example for me in particular. I used to have such an aversion to doing work on my body, perhaps get in shape or start an exercise routine. I thought people that were overly focused on their bodies were like vain and I could never be like them. And I would have all this resistance. And it was because I had gone through so much trauma. I just needed to smoke weed and drink alcohol and hide and be not confident and not be secure in my body, because on the other end of that, being secure, being confident, feeling good in my body, that might mean that I would have to be open into being seen at a deeper level. Perhaps I would get more sexual attention, which at the time I did not want due to my trauma and due to other things that were going on. So I can look back and be like, yeah, I actually wasn't ready. So that's usually what I see. If somebody is like very combative or they want to be argumentative with me, or there's like really harsh judgments or triggers, it tells me like, maybe this person isn't totally ready to go super deep just yet. Their ego defenses are still ride or die, and we're not going to be able to get past this wall, get past this barrier into the deeper stuff when their ego defenses are so forceful. Most of the time when people come to me, the ego defenses aren't super forceful. They're just like these limiting beliefs that are holding them back from taking the aligned action to become their true self, to actually work through some of this uncomfortable stuff. And that's the thing, shadow work by nature can be a little uncomfortable. It can also be great. It can also be fun. Like in that testimonial, there was plenty of laughs, there was lots of lightheartedness, but there was also a lot of heavy stuff that we had to get to the bottom of. Your ego likes to protect you from feeling bad too, right? We will do all kinds of stuff to not feel uncomfortable. So yeah, that's the first one that I get, is like, oh, it's not the right time. It's never the right time. It's not the right time to quit smoking. It's not the right time to lose this 20 pounds I've been carrying. It's not the right time to fill in the blank. Excuses will always come up, and most people will call it self-sabotage, but it's actually your ego trying to protect you from moving into an identity that it hasn't experienced yet. I'm thinking about this too. I had a friend who was like a crazy workaholic. It was someone that I used to be in tech with, and now she's a spiritual coach, but she had this aversion to even starting to meditate because she thought it would make her bad at her job, which essentially was true. When you get more tapped into who you really are in your spiritual side, some of these things you used to do, the hyper hustling, the hyper people pleasing, and in the realm of sexual shadow work, a lot of times people's partnerships are on the line. They already have a relationship. There's this fear of like, well, if I do the work, then like, will I still be compatible with my partner? And the answer always is maybe. I see generally people that are in relationships, they either grow together with their partner and they actually grow a stronger and closer bond, or they grow apart after doing a certain level of shadow work. That's why I always say, if you're doing this work and you're partnered, like let your partner in on like what you're doing and keep them updated on your progress. Let them in. But for other people, they're like, oh no, what if I do this work and then I'll have to be vulnerable with somebody. I'll have to get into a relationship, right? And always the answer is you never have to do anything. But I think this is what really holds people back, because they're like, oh my gosh, if I start to do this work, then all of these things I've been telling myself about my identity might not be true anymore. So it's very, very common. Again, this excuse of like, it's not the right time. Always double question yourself when you're about to embark on a self-development or a shadow work journey and you're telling yourself it's not the right time. Double click on that and really figure out, is it not the right time, or is this just resistance to change? Okay, another one I get, especially before somebody becomes a client, is I don't have the money for it, or it's too expensive. A lot of scarcity stuff pops up. And sometimes that is true. Like literally the money isn't in your bank account. But most of the time, people actually can afford it. They just have this fear of parting with the money because either A, they haven't ever invested in themselves to that degree. And that can be scary for the ego too, because you're signaling to your unconscious mind when you make an investment like that, like this is a serious thing that we're doing. And this is an investment that I'm making in myself, which means I am invested in my identity changing. The ego does not like that. So that's another thing that I sometimes help people through if they're like kind of on the fence about the money portion. It's like, let's really think through. Can you actually not afford it? Or is this just an edge for your ego because that investment is going to signal the fact that identity is changing and the ego wants to resist that? A lot of times, though, people are just scared. They're just fearful. It's like a let me think about it thing, and then they'll talk themselves out of it. Again, I never hold it against someone if they have one of these alignment calls with me and then decide not to work with me for whatever reason. I've actually had it where some people have come back and been like, wow, that one session with you actually set me off on this different trajectory. And while this might not be a fit to work in this type of container with you for my financial reasons or other reasons or timing or whatever it is, it usually does spark something on what they want to do next in their life. And I've had it before where people will come back to me months later and go, okay, now I'm ready. So again, you always want to listen to your body. You never want to like force something, but you should feel some resistance. That actually is a good thing. And this is another thing when I talk about ego resistance, it's actually a sign that you're pushing up against your identity's edges. You're pushing up against change. And that is actually showing you that like you're doing the work, like something's happening. So I always say, don't be afraid of resistance. In fact, welcome it in. I also find that when we're doing sexual shadow work, it's a very vulnerable area of your life. And it can feel the scariest to go near, especially if you've had any kind of sexual trauma in this area, or let's say you've had a lot of struggle in this area, either being intimate with others or you've been avoiding this area of your life. I get that a lot too. People come to me, they're just like, I've just been straight up avoiding this and I know it's time to look at it. That's super common. And when someone's already working with me, I usually see resistance come up around things like that, like missing sessions, wanting to skip sessions. This happened with another client recently where he was like, can we just like not do any sessions this month? It's not the right time right now. I'm dealing with this external relationship thing. Let's put it off. Let's not do any sessions until like a month from now. And I said, you know what? We can absolutely do that, but I'm going to challenge you a little bit and think about, is this something that you really want to put off, or is this resistance popping up? I was like, because usually when someone comes to me and they want to defer sessions or they want to miss sessions, they're usually on the cusp of a big change. And this is exactly what happened with this client recently. And he was like, oh my God, it was so cool that you knew that was going to happen, that I was going to have this big change or this big breakthrough. And it really is kind of like clockwork. I usually see it sometimes in the 3 to 6 month mark with people because we've done a lot of the excavation and then things in their reality starts changing and there are these new opportunities that come up or these big shifts that are happening in their life. And it can be very scary again to the ego, and the ego will try to resist this. But ego resistance can also show up in all these other ways. One is staying comfortable and avoiding new actions. This can look like two different things. It can either look like just completely ignoring and going into robot mode and just like, da, 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 da. I'm not going to pay attention to this part of my life. Or it goes into like this hyper intellectualization. That's almost like a freeze response where you're just ruminating on something and you're never actually making any changes in your life. You're thinking about all the changes you want to make. You're learning about all this stuff, but you're not actually taking any kind of like embodied action in your life. A big one that comes up, I actually saw this in my Jungian coaching cohort. So to get certified as a Jungian coach, we had to go through a year of shadow work coaching. Oh my gosh, it was so much, you guys, because we were all practice coaching on each other too. And we're also learning all of this stuff. So it was like a very accelerated path of shadow work. And you would see people get triggered at certain points where they wanted to kind of like fight the curriculum, find something wrong with it, disagree with it. I already know all of this. I actually had a little bit of that when I was in the midst of my Jungian coaching certification. I forgot what it was. It was probably a few months in. And I think we got to like archetypes, and I was like, this is so basic. There's so many more archetypes and what they're talking about here. I've been studying Jungian psychology. And I remember like getting this little know-it-all kind of vibe. And there was actually a very important lesson for me that was around the corner that was going to be changing my identity. But that response was like, I already know this. I don't need to listen to this. So these are my two big ones. Is over-intellectualization is one of my big ego defenses. Let's just keep thinking about it and not do anything about it. Let me just learn some more so that I can feel like I'm in control. And the other one is like, I'll get this like know-it-all syndrome where I feel like I don't need to learn something from somebody that has wisdom because I'm smarter, I know more or whatever. And I actually had this with one of my first spiritual coaches. Now I can look back and see that what she was teaching me was legit. But at the time, I don't think I was ready for it. So like I kind of turned on her and I was like, you're teaching me bullshit and I already know all of this and I'm not really gaining any value from this. And I broke up with her essentially. And now I look back and I was like, oh, it's because we were really delving into some stuff that like my ego really wasn't ready for at the time. So again, this could also be a sign that you're not ready. And also that's okay too. I think we live in this culture of like, you gotta like be the best and fix everything about yourself and like get to these certain milestones. Like shadow work isn't like a journey that you're supposed to be like competitive on, you know? You really want to honor your body, your nervous system, like where you're at. And again, if you're having like a super aversion to something, listen to that. And yeah, maybe it's your ego resistance, but maybe that's okay. Okay, here's another one. Getting distracted by external circumstances, like a family member needing attention. This is another big one. Again, whenever somebody wants to pause coaching or skip a session or something like this, it's usually there's like, oh, someone else needs my attention, and all of their focus goes on to this like other person in their family or something that's going on. And the immediate response is like, oh, well, I don't have time to like do this anymore. Another thing that can also happen is like physical stuff. So like sprained ankles, sudden illness. This is also a sign of ego resistance. I use this example a lot, but it's like someone with a public speaking fear gets the speaking gig of their dreams and, you know, right before they get laryngitis. But then the moment they actually have to go on stage, if they really just push through that resistance, it's like suddenly their voice works again. This is like so common. But that, again, physical reactions can also happen as a form of ego resistance. Money issues, also another sign of ego resistance. I had this during my self-development process where it was like, suddenly I was having all of these money issues where I almost could not complete my Jungian certification when I was like halfway through. I'm telling you, getting the certification was like going to the depths of your shadow and coming back out. And when I was like in mid-depth, I was having all of these financial problems. It all ended up working out. I had to push through it. I had to like really feel through the fears of scarcity and loss and instability and all of this stuff. But it's basically like unconsciously you might make decisions that aren't the best for yourself financially because the ego knows if we can get this person back into survival mode, they'll revert back to their old identity. So sometimes when you go on this journey, you will get tested with some pretty hardcore stuff, depending on what you're working on and what you're clearing. Again, I don't want to give you another ego defense and be like, well, I don't want to run out of money, so I can't do shadow work. That's not what I'm saying. It's like everyone has their own unique flavor of what's going to pop up. But the moment you push through the resistance and you get through that constriction, all of this stuff opens up for you. It's kind of like a test. Another form of ego resistance is confusion. This has also happened to me, and I've seen it happen to a lot of other people too. It's like the stuff that you know inherently, suddenly you don't know, suddenly you become confused, suddenly you feel like you can't make a decision, you're overthinking things, you're like, wait, is this the right move? What's happening? You're just kind of confused. That's another sign of ego resistance. Essentially, the ego is hijacking your mind to confuse you so that you don't move forward. And this is also why having a coach is so important. When I was going through the thick of my shadow work, having a coach was crucial because she was able to hold the vision for me, remind me of what I was doing while I was in the depths of like confusion and despair and darkness and like, oh my God, my old life is crumbling around me. Like, oh my God, this is so scary. To have somebody go, remember why you're here. Remember the goal. We're getting to the other side. This is what you're doing here. This is the identity that you're going towards. Let's just keep moving through. And that's another thing that I help people do is like holding you accountable when the ego resistance creeps in and goes, oh no, actually, I'm suddenly confused, or I'm about to go repeat a pattern that I know that I want to not repeat. I can call it out and go, hey, look, there's a pattern. Hey, look, you're actually not confused. You know this stuff. Hey, this struggle you're going through, it's an illusion. Let's remember the big picture over here. Having a coach during shadow work is so important to have that anchor. Okay, so let's think about, why does resistance come up? Well, it brings those hidden and internal conflicts to the surface to acknowledge and work with. So sometimes this resistance is like such a great thing to go, oh, okay, there it is. There it is. This is what the ego has been using to keep you from your ideal reality. Let's work with that. It's good when resistance comes up. I'll tell you, when you're in the middle of it feels frustrating as hell. It sucks. But once you start doing shadow work enough, you start welcoming resistance and going, oh, okay, this means it's working. This means something's going on in my psyche and like we can work with this. It basically shows you where the change is needed and it pushes you to grow by confronting it. This is also how we integrate shadow. This is also how we rewire these neural pathways in our brain to align with our future identity. It's actually an indicator that you are evolving and that you're growing. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the psychological defenses that are behind ego resistance. One is repression. Sometimes we bury uncomfortable thoughts or feelings deep into our unconscious mind so we don't have to deal with them. This is like really common. And I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier before, but it's like there's usually some kind of perhaps emotion that your ego thinks is unsafe to feel. Sometimes those are negative emotions, but sometimes those are positive emotions too. I actually repressed a lot of joy, to be honest. Like I remember looking at people that were happy and I would just be like, look at these idiots. Obviously, nothing bad has ever happened to them. Why are they so happy? Ugh. But repression is the baseline of all shadow work anyways. It's like, what have we repressed into the unconscious mind? Another aspect is denial, like simply denying that a reality exists. Sometimes we can get into magical thinking or even delusion to escape the reality that's right in front of us. And some of us have really created this adaptive response to go into fantasy land, especially if you've had like a lot of developmental trauma, to be able to escape a scary or dangerous situation for your ego. So it's only a problem when we go later in life and we haven't really checked these things, but just straight up denial of reality is another psychological defense behind resistance. Another one is projection. So you're projecting onto others your own feelings because you can't own them. So you might have a lot of, let's say, buried rage inside of you that needs to be acknowledged, but instead you're going to point out at everybody else's anger problems. And you're really going to notice it too, because you're not going to recognize the rage that you're holding within yourself, but you're going to notice everybody else that's angry and you're going to take issue with it. Another form would be displacement. This is kind of like you come home from a shitty day at work and you kick the dog. Hopefully you're not kicking the dog, but you know what I mean. You're taking out your feelings onto another person and making them the source of your problems. I've seen this too with people that are in relationships where they're like, well, if only my partner would do A, B, or C, then I wouldn't have this problem, right? It's like almost like you not taking responsibility for yourself and really displacing the responsibility onto somebody else. Another thing that can happen sometimes when you're going through ego resistance is regression. You might go back to old behaviors. Oh my gosh, this was a big one for me too. Sometimes when I'm going through like a big identity change, I want to smoke cigarettes. Like that is my thing. I want to like just drink a bottle of wine and smoke a few cigarettes. And I'm learning to even still to this day, like how to incorporate this into my life in like a ritual way. But old me like always wants to come back and like get smashed or like go smoke cigarettes or go do something that's like really unhealthy for my body. But you'll see this as a form of resistance is that you kind of go back to these old habits. And the key is here is also don't beat yourself up for this. Again, it's a sign that something is changing in your environment and your ego wants to bring you back to this like old identity. And it can sometimes come out in this way that you don't necessarily love, but just again, remind yourself like, okay, this is the ego trying to get me back into my old identity because things are changing. Now, a lot of times if you're not doing shadow work, and this is where it gets really frustrating for people, is like they'll go to make a change. They'll say, you know what, I want to be open to love and dating, or like I want to reclaim this part of my sexuality, or even if it's something like, yeah, I want to like eat better or lose the weight or quit smoking or whatever. There's always this resistance that pops up as a form of self-sabotage, and without doing this work and without doing it consciously, people will just stay in like these self-sabotage cycles and will submit to the ego resistance, not realizing that if they just pushed through, they would get the results that they desire. And a big one, I want to say it again, a really big form of resistance that I see with my clients, because it's also my biggest ego resistance, as I mentioned before, is intellectualization. That's keeping things up in the mind. It's over analyzing things, avoiding uncomfortable feelings by thinking through everything. So how we can work through all kinds of resistance, especially intellectualization, it's a couple things. One, feeling our feelings, allowing them to come up and express through our bodies, taking action towards a goal, even if it's uncomfortable. This is so important. Taking action. Again, this resistance will always come up when we're on the brink of something new, and knowing that you just got to push through and take an action no matter how uncomfortable it is. Just understanding that this is a completely normal phenomenon when you are doing any kind of shadow work, and understanding that it is a natural part of your growth. And we can become really empowered when we can move past resistance, because it's kind of building our resilience. It's building our grit a little bit. Like, fuck yeah, I did that. Yeah, I moved through that really uncomfortable thing. Yes, I said yes to that scary opportunity, but then it led to all of this expansion. And this is also something that I always remind people is like, before we expand, there's always this like constriction. There's always this contraction. I mean, it's how a seed grows, right? There's kind of this constriction, this pressure, this breaking before the flower, before the plant can come out. I kind of relate it to like quicksand, you know? It's like just relax, stay focused, do what you got to do to get out, but like don't panic. Don't go into survival mode. Or maybe more like an undertow in the ocean, you know? It's like, don't fight it, just let it take you, and then make your moves to get back to shore. Sometimes also, I don't think I mentioned this, but response to resistance can be try to over control or fight, and that also doesn't work. It's like we have to surrender to what's happening while also being able to take aligned action. And again, this is why it's so important to have a coach when you're doing this work that can really help guide you when you get to these transition points where you feel the constriction, you feel the resistance, and it's scary for the ego. I think this is going to be the last episode before Reborn starts. So this is last call if you are watching this video now. But on April 27th, there is an 8-week group coaching journey that I am bringing people on. We're going through the 8 layers of sexual shadow. It's going to be educational. It's going to be fun. There's going to be some unique visualization, integration practices for you to integrate sexual shadow. The whole idea is that you are going to be able to move into a new identity around your sexual expression that's more aligned with your soul's calling. So there's going to be 8 live modules that you can watch the recording afterwards as well if you can't make it live. And there's also 1 integration session with me If we come across any ego resistance during that 8 weeks, you will have one-on-one support as well. But again, sometimes ego resistance isn't even that crazy. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I was blocking this feeling I needed to feel. Or you know what? Yeah, I think I am going to push through and make that dating profile. So resistance doesn't have to be these major, huge, soul shaking things. They can sometimes be small, but you'll notice when they come up because it'll just feel kind of uncomfortable to do. Other than that, I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.